everybody. Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Podcast. Hope you're having a great day. Welcome in. This is episode 77. Today is October 13th, 2021. My name is Emmy Nixon, college student at Bethany College. And recording with me, my co-host, as always, the Longhorn Steelers Spur fan himself, the Stat King himself, Michael Wing. What is up, man?
What is up, my friend? We are back for our weekly now routine NFL episode Wednesdays. We will be doing our week 6 picks. We are both coming off our worst weeks yet picking games. We'll get to that a little later in the show. We're going to do a little mini segment. We're going to, I guess, it's called Panic Meter. We're going to, on a scale of 1 to 5, determine how much panic there should be for a list of about 7 to 8 teams in the league. And I think we were going to, since it's set up already, sort of talk a little bit about this American League Championship Series that will start on Friday between the Houston Astros and the Boston Red Sox. So welcome in. We have a lot going on in the sports world. We are going to preview the NBA season coming up here on Friday, I'm pretty sure. If not Friday, then definitely this weekend and before it starts next Tuesday. We're really excited for that. We have a lot going on, and so we should just go ahead and jump right into this.
Yeah, let's do it. So the first team that we're going to be rating their panic meter is the Kansas City Chiefs, who sit currently last in their division, the AFC West, with a 2-3 record, coming off a pretty big loss to the Buffalo Bills last week at home. All right, let's start off with you. What are you thinking for the Chiefs?
So for the Kansas City Chiefs, they're coming off a pretty bad loss to the Buffalo Bills on Sunday night in prime time. And we are basically, for this segment, we're going to determine what their level of panic should be. 1 being there shouldn't be much panic. 5 being there needs to be hit the panic button now. This is really serious. I think for the Kansas City Chiefs, it should be about a 4, 3.5, 4 right now for Kansas City. They have by far the worst defense in the league. They give up the most yards per play. They give up touchdowns on 41% of the opposing team's possessions. That's also by far worse in the league. And so their defense is bad in a lot of categories. It's really bad. And I don't know how much it's going to improve moving forward. I know that Steve Spagnuolo is a really good defensive coordinator. I don't think he's all of a sudden forgotten how to coach. They have had some injuries there. I do think it can get a little better. We know Steve Spagnuolo has a history of this. His defenses sort of struggle early on and then progressively get better later in the season. So that gives me a little bit of hope. But I think this is more than the defense. Patrick Mahomes seems to be pressing a little bit here at times because he knows that the defense can't get stops and he's trying to play hero ball. And it's evidenced by the fact that the Chiefs lead the NFL in turnovers. They're tied with the Jacksonville Jaguars with 11 turnovers this season. And he has 6 interceptions. The most he's thrown in an NFL season previously was 6 interceptions. So he's already tied his high for interceptions. And I get it. Some of them can be blamed on him and some of them can be blamed on, external factors. But it is a little worrisome now that the defense can't get stops. They don't really have much of a traditional running game at times. And your quarterback, even though your offense can still be explosive, is now trying. It seems to me, just watching the team, is trying to make plays that just aren't there. So I don't think it's like total, like this is a disaster type panic for the Chiefs right now, because I do think they have some winnable games coming up. I mean, they put the Giants at home. I think they can. I think they, and I'll get to this later. I think they will beat the Washington football team here upcoming, and they have some winnable games, but there's a lot to be concerned about, and that's why I would put it like 3.5, probably closer to 4 for the Chiefs. But what do you think?
Okay, for me, I like when I asked myself this question in my head, I immediately went to Pro Football Reference, a site where they post a lot of different stats. And I've been looking at a lot of these defensive numbers. And if you look at their corners and their safety, Daniel Sorensen, L'Jarius Sneed, one of their starting cornerbacks, is giving up 145 passer rating when he's targeted. And Daniel Sorensen, their starting safety, is giving up a 153.8 passer rating when he's been targeted. So it's really bad right now. But I don't think L'Jarius Sneed is that bad of a corner. So I think things will revert to the mean as time goes along. I think they've played a lot of really good offenses. And I think there's reason to have hope with that. But here's the thing. They've kind of lost a bit of their identity. You know, when Patrick Mahomes was drafted and the Chiefs had that really bad defense, the one calling card that defense had was their ability to rush the passer. They had that player that went to the Niners. Can't remember his name. But they also had, obviously, Chris Jones and Justin Houston. And that pass rush was prolific. And that was that defense's calling card. Like, we may not be able to cover as well as other defenses, but we're going to rush the passer and we're going to get after you. And right now, this defense doesn't have that identity. So for me, I think if you're the Chiefs defense, you get Chris Jones back, you get Frank Clark back, and you get back to rushing the passer at a high level, and things will work its way back to normal. I don't think this defense is going to be great, even with an improved pass rush when they get their starting pass rushers back. But I do think that they can at least be like 20th or so, and you can win a lot of games being the 20th ranked defense, but you can't win consistently with the last ranked defense. So for me, I'm going to say
it's really tough.
I'm going to say the panic meter is going to be at a 3, because I think this defense can get better.
Go ahead.
And I think a lot of the problems the offense is having is self-inflicted. A lot of fumbles, a lot of drop passes, a lot of just bad execution. And I think Andy Reid is going to really start getting into his creative bag again and really try to scheme some things up.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the defense being respectable, and right now they're not even respectable. Like, all the numbers that we've mentioned, it's pretty horrendous. But we trust their coaching staff. We know Pat to be in it in the end, but they have put themselves in a deep hole. It is unlikely at this point, barring that they win out or tie in that home field advantage throughout the playoffs, because they've already lost the game to the Ravens. They've already lost the game to to the Chargers. You know, they've already lost the game to the Bills. I mean, they lost games to the top competitors in the AFC, who are all going to be competing for that top bye, and there's only one bye. So they put themselves in a sort of hole now, to where that path tended not to be, but they've put themselves in a tougher hole now. It's going to be a tough hole to climb out of, but we'll see what happens.
Right. The schedule is going to open up a little bit, and if you're a Chiefs fan, you just got to hope that this defense can gain some confidence, maybe force some turnovers, and really try to become more opportunistic. Because if you're going to give up a lot of yards, if you're going to give up a lot of points, the one thing that you can do to help your offense is force turnovers, and they haven't even done that.
Right. So moving on, another team in their division that started 3-0, started really well, although they did play 3 bad teams, have now dropped 2 in a row to 2 AFC North opponents, the Ravens and the Steelers. That would be the Denver Broncos. So what do you think? What is your panic meter for the Denver Broncos?
For me, the panic meter is about a 3.5 for the Broncos. Now, here's the thing. I think for me personally, I'm a little bit higher on the Broncos right now than a lot of people are, given that they just lost 2 games in a row. But another key thing to take into account here is we're going to know a lot more about this team once they face the Raiders this weekend as well. That's going to be a key divisional matchup where they can get back on track. But going off of what we have seen in that Steelers game, I just think obviously the Steelers offense was anemic before that game, but if you look at within the scope of that game, the running game, the push that the offensive line was creating, and also just the incredible plays that those receivers were making, I think it's fair to say that Pittsburgh was just the more desperate team. They ran into a very desperate team that was really pushed to the edge and just wanted it a little more. If you look at like Najee Harris, he couldn't be tackled the entire game. So I'm still kind of where I've been all year with the Broncos, which I think they're going to be in wild card contention when like at the close of the year. I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs or miss the playoffs, but I think whether they make the playoffs or not, if they're in contention, that's a successful year for the Broncos. So with that, I'm saying the panic meter should be at about 3.5.
I sort of agree with you. I think it's about a 3 right now. Look, Pittsburgh played really well on Sunday, especially on the offensive line, and that's what we've been waiting for. It's a young, talented offensive line, and they were able to contain those edge rushers and that defensive front of the Broncos, and they were able to generate push, and Najee Harris did what any talented running back would do with some of those holes that the offensive line was opening up. And Ben had time to throw, and we know, I can go get the stats. We know Ben wins a lot of games. Any quarterback really can win a lot of games when they have that sort of running game. You don't have to be very talented to do that. And I just think it sort of wore down on the Broncos defense. They were tired. But a lot of my concern with the Broncos is on the offensive side of the ball. And that's obvious. I mean, they're the 9th worst scoring offense in the NFL, only averaging about 21 points per game. They're missing a couple of their top weapons, and we all know that. Jerry Jeudy's has not been playing, and they've lost KJ Hamler, a speedster, a guy that can stretch the field for the entirety of the season. And it seems to me they just have sort of a problem with consistency along that offensive line. And they're not a very good team converting third downs. In fact, they're one of the worst in the league converting third downs. And that's really where they struggled the most against the Steelers defense. They only converted like 2 or 3 third downs that entire game. And, they converted at 37%, which is about an average rate for an NFL team last season. This year, they're all the way down to 28.6%. That's bottom 5 in the NFL. So I think what it really came down to last week against Pittsburgh, if you can't convert third downs on offense, especially on the road, well, then you're asking your defense to be on the field more, and the defense gets tired. And that's really what we saw. So I think they need to be better on third downs. I think they do have enough. I really like Tim Patrick. I really like Cortland Sutton. I really like the 2 running backs that they have, Melvin Gordon and the other young guy, Javonte Williams, who had a big run in this game. And, their offensive line hasn't been fully healthy, which is why I'm not going full panic mode yet. But I think there is some concern with that offense. They do have their struggles in the red zone and, converting in those critical situations. So if they can get better situationally, and I have full confidence in the offensive coordinator, Pat Shurmur, who's been doing this for a long time. I like the Broncos. I do agree with your assessment that they'll be in the running for a wild card spot. I don't know if they get a wild card spot, but yes, there is concern, but it's not disastrous yet.
Right. And
so I put it at a 3.
Yeah. And another key thing here is they were actually really close to making that a game last week. I'm sure you saw.
Oh, yeah.
If they got that 4th down late in that game, I think the last drive they had, they were probably 2 yards away from converting that. If they had gotten that, then that was anybody's game. So I'm still not ready to be full panic mode. But, yeah, I'm with you. That offense, there's definitely some things to figure out. And I do think losing Jerry Jeudy early in the season really hurt them in terms of having a guy who you can put in the slot and separate very quickly, especially on those 3rd and 5 to 3rd and 8 ranges. Jerry Jeudy was a guy who was extremely quick off the line and could beat corners off the punch, and they don't have that right now. Right. So, moving on.
Another team in the AFC West. It's the Las Vegas Raiders. Yep. I have a lot of stuff going around this organization right now. So, where would you put the panic meter for Las Vegas?
For me, I think the panic meter is at a 4/to be determined. I still think Derek Carr and this offense have a lot of talent, but this offensive line is a mess right now. And this offensive line is really taking down the ceiling that this offense can get to. This offense should be an elite offense week in and week out, but with the way their offensive line is playing, it's just keeping them from being able to do that.
Right.
Another key thing here is last week, I think a lot of their guys maybe were checked out a little bit. You mentioned John Gruden and that whole situation and how he had a quote where he said, "I don't want to be a distraction. I'm resigning," or yada, yada, yada. So maybe that was a distraction, and maybe that was why some of those receivers made those key drops in those different situations. Bryan Edwards had a key drop. Darren Waller had a key drop. And also that 4th down late in the game, Derek Carr just missed He completely missed on a wide open receiver. And that's very uncharacteristic of what we've seen from Derek Carr over these last few years. So I don't think it's full panic yet, but there's concern just simply because of the drama going on.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't have too much to say about this other than whenever you lose your head coach and whenever something like this is going around, especially something of this caliber, and we won't go into all the details, but whenever you lose your head coach, especially early on in the season, it can be really hard to recover from that. And there's lots of factors that go into this, but look, I still like this roster, and I know that you kind of laid out some of the worries in terms of the offensive line and some of that stuff, and I get it. But I really like the way that Derek Carr has been playing. We've obviously mentioned this. He's playing like a top 10, top 12 quarterback in the league, and whenever you have that, you are going to be in it until the end. And we mentioned the improved defense. There's still a lot of season left. Maybe they have a new buy-in with this intern head coach. Who knows? But really, the only thing you can say about Las Vegas right now is if they can't sort of move past this situation with John Gruden, and they can't eliminate all the outside noise and all this stuff, then it's going to be trouble. But since I think they have one of the best quarterbacks in the league, they have some of the best weapons in the league, and an improved defense, despite some of the struggles the past couple of weeks, I still think they'll be what the Raiders have been the past couple of years. And that's like average to slightly above average team that might be in the running at the end of the season. So I put it at like a 4. Could go higher depending on the, I guess, attitude of the players moving forward.
Right. So moving on from that, we're moving on finally to a new division here, which is the AFC South with the Indianapolis Colts, who are currently sitting at 1-4, coming off an overtime loss to the Baltimore Ravens after leading 22-3. So what is your outlook on the Colts right now?
It's bare. 1-4 is a big hole to climb out of. They should have won that game last week. I mean, you look at it, they had a blocked field goal. If they had made that field goal, I mean, that game's most likely out of reach and they win. So it's not like they were, totally outplayed. We know they outplayed Baltimore for a majority of that game. And Carson Wentz looked as good as he has in a while, at least when I've been watching him. He played a really good game, I thought. And they have, after sort of abandoning it the first couple weeks of the season, they have gone back to Jonathan Taylor, who they need to utilize more going forward in the pass and in the run game. But I just think this is one of the teams that in our NFL preview I was wrong about. I thought reuniting Carson Wentz with Frank Reich, along with all these weapons, Michael Pittman, all these weapons that they have would sort of, I guess, be enough to get them to the playoffs. But it's been injuries. It's been a not healthy offensive line. It's been this and that, not healthy at quarterback, all this stuff that sort of accumulated into this 1-4 start. And I don't think they can do much to recover from this. moving forward. I don't have much prep on that. It's just when I've watched this team, they don't pass the eye test. So I think it's not over, but it's getting very close to that point. So I put it at like a 4.5, 5.
Okay. Yeah,
I don't have very much confidence moving forward.
yeah, I'm kind of at a weird place with the Colts right now. Obviously, I was a lot lower on the Colts than you were coming into the season, but really, when you think about it, a couple of games, the ball bounces a different way. They're maybe at 500 right now. I mean, there was a few games early in the season where they were in the red zone time and time again. They just weren't able to convert. And now the offense is starting to click. They're getting Jonathan Taylor involved. And the defense looked really solid for 50 minutes last night. But here's the deal. I think they just ran into a MVP level quarterback. I think that's the bottom line. And I think they played playoff level football in that game, for most of that game at least. So given their schedule of these next few games, they've got the Texans this week, the 49ers, and the Titans. So if they can get one of those games, then they got the Jets and the Jaguars, and then boom, you're right back to 5-5. So if you're a Colts fan, you look at these next few games. If they take care of business the way they're supposed to, then I think there's reason to be optimistic that things can be turned around.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it in years past. It is a longer year this year. You get one extra game. So 1-4 in a 16-game season is worse than 1-4 in a 17-game season because you do get that extra game. But at this point, you're really fighting for, I guess, one of the last wild card spots in the AFC, nothing more than that. I think the Titans you were right, they're going to win this division. Even though their defense isn't very good, but they're still good. Those are the doubts I voiced on this podcast at the very beginning of the season, but they still
Looks like you went frozen. Uh-oh.
In years past. I think the Chiefs had a year where they started like 1-5 and then reeled off 10 straight victories to finish 10-6 or something like that. I mean, we've seen drastic turnarounds in years past. They have the talent to do it, but I think you're looking at a team that just they've dealt with too many injuries. They don't have their bye week until later in the season, week 14, which I don't think is very beneficial to them. And I think you're going into like this must-win territory over the next couple of games. You have to beat the Texans. I think they will. But then at San Francisco, that's not an easy game. The Titans are not an easy game. And then the Jets. So I think over these next 4 games, they have to be 3-1 to give themselves a realistic chance.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay. Yep. For me, the panic meter was around a 4, and for you was 4.5. So, yeah, things are definitely, it's entering that danger area for Colts fans for sure. So, moving on to our first NFC team of this segment, and that is the Carolina Panthers, who started the season 3-0, but since then have faltered a little bit, lost 2 games in a row. The defense hasn't looked as good these last couple games. It's fair to say, and Sam Darnold hasn't looked quite as sharp either. So, what's your feeling on the Carolina Panthers right now?
Mm, I I don't know. I put it at like a 3. Um, I don't view their schedule as world beating. I think they can get through it. I mean, Minnesota, that's a winnable game. The Giants are a winnable game. The Falcons are a winnable game. The Patriots are a winnable game. The Cardinals, maybe not so much. Washington's a winnable game. The Dolphins seem like a winnable game. They have a lot of winnable games on their schedule. And I get it. Their defense, after like a world beating first 3 weeks of the season, doesn't look as good. But they've played two. The Eagles are a decent offense, and the Cowboys are a really good offense. And nobody stops. I mean, the stats prove it. Nobody stops the Cowboys offense, especially when they play at home in Dallas in that time slot that they played that game in. So I worry a little bit about Sam Darnold's, I guess, regression to the mean the past couple weeks, but I have full confidence in Matt Rule as a coach. I've said this before on previous podcasts that if we were to vote for Coach of the Year today, I might vote for Coach Matt Rule. I think getting Christian McCaffrey healthy again, hopefully, in these next 1 to 2 weeks will be really beneficial. So I'm not like totally panicking there. And I think once they get Stephon Gilmore healthy, and I believe week 7 or 8 is when he's eligible to come back. And once they get CJ Henderson fully, I guess, integrated into this defense, the defense will be back to performing at what we saw the first couple weeks of the season. So just based on the coach, the winnable schedule, I think they have a very favorable schedule moving forward. And the health of some of the key players and them getting healthy in the next couple of weeks, I don't think there's much reason to panic. I put it at like a 2.5 to a 3.
Yeah. For me, I think the Panthers panic rate should be around a 3. I'm right with you there. For me, I one thing I recommend y'all go look at is the Brett Coleman film analysis that he did on the Panthers. It showed a lot of the change in philosophy that they had during the Cowboys game and how that burnt them. During the Cowboys game, they went to a lot of nickel defense with extra defensive backs on the field, basically putting all their chips on the table, basically saying, I think we can stop your run game with our front four, basically. And that wasn't the case. They got cute. They basically put themselves at a disadvantage in terms of weight class, and they got burned. So I don't think that game was very indicative on what their defense is overall. And last week, let's be honest, Sam Darnold just had a bad game. That defense did not play that bad. And I just think they were on the field for most of that second half, and that was the main reason they kind of crumbled at the end a bit there. So I still think this team is going to be in the picture for the wild card for the remainder of the year. I still think this defense is good enough to lead the charge for this team. Sam Darnold just has to clean up the turnovers and kind of once Christian McCaffrey gets in there, the offense should stabilize and be at least league average. That's my thinking.
Right. I agree with that. So our last 2 teams here are both NFC West teams, the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. So let's start with Seattle. What is your panic meter for the Seahawks?
Well, if Geno Smith didn't show what he did at the end of that game versus the Rams, this would be at a 5 right now. I'm not going to lie, because we've seen this defense struggle. We've seen this offensive line struggle, and obviously the strength is those two wide receivers on offense, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. But in theory, without the Russell Wilson in there, who's going to get them the ball? But in that second half versus the Rams, as soon as Geno Smith went in there, he was really sharp. He made good decisions with the football, and he led them down the field for a couple drives and got them back in the game. So I think there's reason to believe that maybe Geno Smith can kind of just help them hang around. I don't think they'll be as good as if Russell Wilson was in there, obviously, but I just think they'll be able to hang around 500. And that's really all you can hope for from a backup quarterback. And here's my thing with Geno Smith. Geno Smith came into the league at a really weird transitional period in the NFL. He came in and he was kind of labeled as this spread college offense type of quarterback. And they were like, oh, he's not going to be able to work in the NFL because he runs a spread offense. But now it's different. I mean, there's spread offenses everywhere in the NFL. And I mean, Geno Smith has a good arm. He has talent. And honestly, I'm really excited to watch how this goes. This is kind of like a case study in my mind of like what Geno Smith is, honestly. And also the fact that he ended up on the Jets didn't help either. But I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
The Seattle Seahawks franchise as a whole, I think, is going in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. And that's really tough to say, but I think it's just facts. If you look at their defense, which is atrocious right now, and I'm going to save the stats for later when we pick their game against Pittsburgh. But if you just look at their ranks in total defense, every year since they won the 2013 Super Bowl with the Legion of Boom, and they decimated the Broncos 43-8 in that Super Bowl. Every year it's gotten progressively worse and worse and worse and worse. And they've had time to implement new personnel, all this stuff, and it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And I know they lost defense coordinators and all this stuff, but that's just the facts. I was going to put this at a 5, and I wish that I had like at least a full half or a full game to see what Geno Smith actually is. Because yes, he played very well when he came in those couple of drives at the Thursday night game against the Rams. But I just wish I had more. And I also think this how long Russell Wilson is going to be out. Some people believe it could only be a month. Some people believe it could be closer to 2 months. And I think when you look at their schedule, that could really change things. If he's only out a month, well, let's look at this. That's 4 weeks. That's approximately 4 weeks. So they play at Pittsburgh, and then they have 2 home games before their bye weeks, which I think are very winnable with a quarterback the caliber of Geno Smith. The Saints, I think that's a winnable game at home in front of those fans. And then the Jaguars, I think they'll win that game. So if they can steal 2 of 3 going into the Week 9 bye week, they can be 4-4 at 500 going into the Week 9 bye week. And if you can get Russell Wilson back after that Week 9 bye week, well, then you're set up pretty well down the stretch for the second half of the season. But if he's out for longer than that, if he's out for closer to 6 to 8 weeks, 2 months, well, after the bye week, if you're still stuck with Geno Smith, well, then the schedule toughens up. I mean, you got at Aaron Rodgers, Arizona, Kyler Murray against Geno Smith. Then you have at Washington. I know it's Taylor Heineke, but Taylor Heineke can play. And we know Washington can be very tough to beat. Then you had the 49ers, the Rams, the Bears, the Cardinals again. So I think the panic meter all depends on how long Russell Wilson is out and whether or not they can find something with this disaster of a defense, because we know that they pretty much started this exact same way last season. They were on pace to give up the most yards in NFL history after week 5 last year, and they got progressively better. They acquired Carlos Dunlap, made some acquisitions. They got better throughout the season. Could it be the same thing this season? They're on pace to give up the most yards in NFL history through 5 weeks. Could it prove to be the same way? I don't know. But anytime you lose a player the caliber of Russell Wilson, the panic meter is going to be at least a 4. I don't put it at 5 because we saw good things from Geno Smith, and there are varying reports on Russell Wilson, and we don't know for sure how long he'll actually be out. So we can't say definitively, oh, yes, they're screwed because he's going to be out for this long, and I don't see them winning these games after the bye week with Geno Smith. But we also can't say, yeah, they're going to be just fine with Geno Smith based off a couple drives against the Rams. If they can get to 4-4 by the bye week and have Russell Wilson back, I think they'll be A-okay. They'll be able to compete for a playoff spot. But if not, it's going to be really tough. I put the Seahawks panic meter like a 4 right now. It's a lot will depend on how they look this week in Pittsburgh.
Right. And
they can't come and get the doors blown off of them.
yeah, and you were frozen for a second, but another key thing is the running game for the Seahawks. Chris Carson, the fact that he's been out, and hopefully they're getting him back in these next couple of weeks. I think they are projected to get him back this week. I think he's questionable, but if they can get him back and they can have a solid running game, I think that will not only help Geno Smith, but that'll also help that offensive line stay fresh and actually not have to get knocked off the ball every play and be on their heels. So it's not completely dire for the Seahawks right now, but the concern level is definitely there given the loss of a Hall of Fame level quarterback of Russell Wilson's caliber. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, the last team in this segment is San Francisco. They sit at 2-3, coming off a loss to the Cardinals. And they now have Trey Lance playing quarterback. So what do you think for the San Francisco 49ers?
I put their panic meter at a 2. And here's why. I think you saw a lot of good things from Trey Lance this week. He was going through his progressions. His pocket presence was really solid. It was a lot better than what we saw in the preseason. He looked a lot more comfortable. Obviously, it wasn't perfect, but I think there was reason to be optimistic. And then defensively, their coverage was, for the most part, really, really good against one of the best offenses in football. Holding this Cardinals offense to 17 points is no small task. And really, the only reason they lost this game was just the incredible throws that Kyler Murray was making. I think there was like 3 or 4 throws that Kyler Murray made and I'm thinking of one specifically that throw down the sideline to Rondale Moore. That I legit think maybe less than 10 quarterbacks in history could make that throw. I mean, rolling backwards on throws it off his back foot perfectly on the sideline to where only Rondale Moore could get it. I mean, just incredible. So they got beat by a really good quarterback, and I think if their defense continues to play that way on the back end, I think they can get their running game going and really start to win some games, because we already know they're well coached.
I agree with you. I don't have too much panic right. I have a little bit, but not too much panic for the 49ers right now. Look, we all know they're well coached. You saw some really good things, as you said, from Trey Lance. We know, despite, again, missing Raheem Mostert, we know they can run the football. And we know their defense is really good. And how do we know that? Because Arizona coming in last week was a high part, averaging over 35 points per game. They had put up over 450 yards of offense in every single game leading up to last week. And they were held to 17 points last week. And I just think San Francisco, well, actually, they're on a bye week, but they get an entire bye week to get healthy. And then coming out of the bye week, they have two very winnable games to get back over 500. They have Indianapolis at home and then on the road against Chicago. I think they can win both those games. And then is where it gets a little tougher. They have to play Arizona again at the start of November, and then they have a primetime game against the Rams right after that. But right now, I don't have too much panic for the San Francisco 49ers. I have a lot less panic for the 49ers than I do for the Seahawks. Let's just put it that way. And they play in the same division. So I just like the 49ers personnel a little bit more than I do the Seattle Seahawks right now. So
Right.
Let's just say that.
Right. And I also like what I've been seeing from their receiving group. Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk have both been really solid. And I think there was a couple times this game where the timing wasn't that great between Trey Lance and these receivers, but you saw that they were open and that Trey Lance saw them, was looking in the right direction. But the timing wasn't quite there. So I think once they were able to develop that chemistry, this offense will click a lot more.
Right. I agree with that. So that is our NFL Panic Meter segment. We took 7 of the teams that we thought were worthy of discussing, and we gave you our level of panic for each of the teams' circumstances. And given that we are into the thick of the NFL season, now week 6. After this week, we will be 1/3 of the way through with the NFL season. And that teams now have buys. We have less games to pick each week, all the way up until like week 15. So we'll have time to do these sort of fun little segments to give you more analysis and give you guys more NFL coverage moving forward. So that's just a little note there. I think with that, we can go ahead and move on to our picks.
Right. And then, one last thing I want to say is I do plan on making that clip its own video. So if you are watching that video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully you like that content. But yes, we are going to move on to our picks, and that's the main part of the episode. So yeah, let's do this.
So just to recap last week, which was a disaster for me, less a disaster for you, but sort of still a disaster either way. Um, Last week, I don't think I had a week. I was coming off my first winning week in week 4 at 10-7. I had gotten back to 500 at 34-34, but last week I went 5-12, and I missed again on my lock by half a point with Green Bay's crazy overtime victory over the Bengals that failed to hit at -3.5. You, on the other hand, were a game better than me last week at 6-11. You did lock with Tennessee over Jacksonville -4.5, but it still wasn't great. We missed on a lot of the same games in that 1 o'clock window. We both missed on Green Bay. We both missed on Miami. We both missed on New England. We both missed on Washington, and we both missed on Carolina. So right there, it kind of did us in. And then you were a little bit better in the late window than I was. So I don't know. It was a disaster week. Hopefully we don't have those struggles again, and we're going to try to rebound this week. But for those of you who are wondering, I am still there. Is it still? What's up? Okay, cool. I was just about to say, like, that's where our contest stands. We apologize for the technical difficulties. And we should get into picking these. I think it's 14 games because 4 teams are on bye weeks this week. So 2 less games to pick. Tampa Bay -6.5 at Philadelphia. This is a tough one. We have seen Tampa Bay struggle defensively. They haven't looked the part as we all thought they would at the beginning of the season. They are super banged up and thin in the secondary. And we know that Philadelphia has some weapons and can score points. But we also know it's Tom Brady in that offense, that explosive offense with a bunch of weapons. Even when they don't have the likes of Rob Gronkowski, they can still go out there and hang a 40 burger on you. So if we look at the historical, I guess, if we look at it historically, Tampa Bay, since the beginning of last season, hasn't really been great in these prime time sort of matchups. I mean, they've had some close calls here recently in prime time. They didn't look all that great against the Cowboys in week 1 on prime time. And last season, they had a couple Thursday night games where they looked all out of sorts. The Chicago game, the Giants game. So they haven't been the greatest in prime time. I don't have the exact numbers, but they've had some close calls and haven't played their best football. -6.5 is a big spread, especially on the road against a pesky Eagles team. But I find myself in this middle area where I don't know if I want to bet against Brady because it comes back to bite me in the butt every time I do it. But I think I'm going to have to take the points, Philly +6.5. And this is definitely one that I'll reevaluate at the end of the show. I can see it both ways. Okay, so Miami -3.5 at Jacksonville. Let's be quick with this. This is the 0-5 squad against a 1-4 team. What do you think? I am too. Right. So are you taking Detroit +3.5? Okay. I think I took Detroit last week. I think I've taken Detroit a couple weeks in a row. And last week it paid off against the Vikings +7.5. The previous weeks before that, I don't think it worked. And look, we all seen the stat that's been roaming around the past couple of days, and that's that Jared Goff, he's 42-20 when he has Sean McVay as his head coach, and 0-12 without Sean McVay as his head coach. So it's just sort of this stat that's going around. Can he win with another coach? Can he win in this Detroit system? And sure, they've been pesky. They actually rank top 10 in the league in first downs per game. And what that tells me is that they are moving the ball with efficiency, and they're a team that can get into, I guess, scoring position, or what you would call the red zone. But they're a team that's had its fair share of struggles in finishing games and finishing those drives in the red zone. And we saw Green Bay's offense struggle a little bit against this Cincinnati defense, which I do think has significantly improved. And look, Joe Burrow needs to stop running for his life, because, man, when he got hit on that play, everyone's hearts stopped there for a minute. Even mine did. He needs to take himself out of harm's way. But I think I have to go with Cincinnati -3.5, just because I don't have very much, I guess, confidence in the fact that Detroit's already 0-5. They have suffered a couple of heartbreaking losses already. I just think their sort of morale is already just, I don't know. I don't have very much confidence moving forward with Detroit, but I think that's just one of the games that you flip a coin and we'll see what happens. That just seemed okay. All right, so another, or our first divisional matchup here of the week. It's Green Bay -4.5 at Chicago. What do you think on this game? I think I have to agree with you here. The game is in Chicago. Justin Fields has done enough to move this Chicago offense down the field with efficiency. He presents a different element that we all know he did coming in, and that is the ability to be dynamic and make plays outside the pocket and off script, which I think could pose some difficulty for this Green Bay defense that is dealing with some injuries. And I think just offensively, Green Bay sometimes can be they're too. I don't want to say they're over reliant on Devontae Adams because that's not necessarily a terrible thing to be because he's just that good. But at points in times, it just seems like their offense it doesn't have like a identity at points in times, and they're just sort of lackadaisical at times. They've been outplayed at certain points in the season, hadn't necessarily looked apart. And it's another game on the road. So I think I'll still pick them to win because it's Aaron Rodgers. And that's what we always say. But I think Chicago is playing really well right now. They're 3-2. They're in a really good spot with Justin Fields now as their quarterback. And I think they'll be able to run the football against this Green Bay defense and sort of minimize the amount of possessions that that Aaron Rodgers gets. Right. Okay, we agree on that game. Moving forward, Houston Texans Houston Texans at Indianapolis Colts, another divisional matchup. Two struggling teams. It's Indianapolis minus 9.5. So what do you think? Yeah. Hmm. I think I agree with you. They're in that desperate mindset, that desperate mentality that they need to be playing with. Houston is one of those teams that really struggles against the run. I think they're going to give the ball to Jonathan Taylor lots in this game. And I think they're going to just hit him in the mouth early, as you said. This offensive line will be getting pushed. They'll own time of possession. That will give the defense rest. They will come up with a scheme. And as you said, give Davis Mills credit. He has been playing pretty good for a guy that was thrown to the fire just a couple weeks ago against some pretty tough defenses, to be said at that. But I just think the Colts, they need this one more than any other team. Like, they need to win this week, I think, more than any other team does in the NFL. I think you could make a solid argument for that. I think I hesitate a little bit because the line is so big, but I do think the Colts playing at home in front of their own fans. Carson Wentz played well last week. They have all these weapons. We've seen a better run game these past couple of weeks. We've seen them at least play solid football and outplay some really good teams on the road the past couple of weeks for at least a couple quarters. They just need to finish, and I think they'll do that against another bad team here, Houston Texans. So I'll take Indy minus 9.5 with a little bit of hesitation. Right. Okay. So moving on, it is one of the better games of the 1 o'clock window now. Kansas City, we've talked about their struggles in the opening segment, and the Washington football team in Washington. What do you think? It's Kansas City minus 6.5. Okay. This is a game where both teams, I think, really need it. Uh, Probably Kansas City more than Washington, but that's a different discussion for another day. A 6.5 point underdog at home is really tough to bet against in the NFL, especially when the opposing team can't seem to stop anything defensively. So, look, I do think Kansas City, just based on the fact that they have Patrick Mahomes and all these weapons, will win this game. But Antonio Gibson in the running game establishing that early, keeping Patrick Mahomes off the field, increasingly better. The defense of Washington has been playing increasingly better the past couple weeks. We know Taylor Heineke can score and move this Washington offense up and down the field. We've seen them score points. I think Washington will cover. Ron Rivera is a very good coach, but I expect Kansas City to win. I think it will end up being like a 4 or 5 point Kansas City victory. So I do agree with you here. The key for Kansas City, I think, is just eliminate those turnovers that Patrick Mahomes has seemed to have the past couple weeks and get back to running the ball in a traditional way. I know Clyde Edwards-Helaire is banged up, but whoever that next guy to step up is, they need to hand the ball off more, because Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball 40, 50 times, that's not a formula to win in today's NFL, despite the fact that it is a passing league. You still have to show a commitment to the running game. And you have to do that in this game, especially against this Washington front, that if you tell them early that you're just going to throw the ball, well, they have the guys, we know, to just pin their ears back and get after Patrick Mahomes. So you have to keep them off balance if you want to go in there and cover the spread. But I don't have a lot of confidence right now in Kansas City. I don't think they're a very good football team. I don't think they would rank in the top 10 NFL teams if we were to do a power ranking today. I don't think they're one of the maybe top 5 teams in the AFC right now. They might rank number 5. You can make an argument, but the Bills are better. The Browns are better. The Ravens are better. Chargers are arguably, I think they're better. And then that's not even counting the NFC. So I like Washington to cover. So yeah. Okay, another great game here in the early window before we get to the really good late window. And that is the Los Angeles Chargers, 4-1, coming off another big win last week against the Cleveland Browns, at the Baltimore Ravens, who are coming off a huge win, come from behind victory against the Indianapolis Colts at home on Monday night. They're both 4-1. This game could have big implications in terms of playoff positioning and playoff seeding down the stretch, just because it's two what look to be AFC powerhouses facing up against each other here early in the season. And we know that the head-to-head matchup is so important in these type of games. It is Baltimore -3.5 at home against the Chargers. What do you think? Mhm. Right. Right. This game is must-watch television. If you're going to watch one game this NFL Sunday, I think you pick this game. Look, let's start from a Baltimore perspective, because you were just talking about how groundbreaking and how great Lamar Jackson has been, and he's absolutely destroyed every false narrative that there has been surrounding him the first couple of years of his career, the past couple of weeks. They said he couldn't beat you throwing the ball, right? He's not a great passer. Well, that was disproven the past couple of weeks, especially last week. They said he can't play from behind. He's only good when he has a running game and he has the lead. Well, nope. That's also been disproven. He has 3 comebacks at 10-plus points just in the first 5 games of this season. So a lot of these areas where people seem to criticize Lamar Jackson, he's absolutely destroyed all of those false narratives. And you mentioned him possibly playing some of the most special or best football that we've ever seen from any NFL player in the history of the league. Well, first of all, he's a winner. The most wins since week 11 of 2018, which is when he made his first career start, that would be Lamar Jackson, 34, 2 more than any other quarterback in the league, including Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and Russell Wilson. Yep, that would be Lamar Jackson. He wins games at about an 80% clip when he doesn't have to face Patrick Mahomes. And then you look at what he did just last week on Monday Night Football, or just a couple days ago, I should say, on Monday Night Football. In the history of the NFL, there have been 4,017 instances where a quarterback has attempted at least 40 pass attempts in a game. Okay? On Monday night, Lamar Jackson completed 86% of his 43 passes. Okay? The highest completion percentage by a quarterback when they have 40 or more pass attempts in those 4,017 games ever in the National Football League. So what an impressive performance. He also overcame the largest deficit of his NFL career. erasing a 19-point deficit in that late third quarter, early fourth quarter against the Colts. He threw for over 400 yards for the first time in his career. He's fifth in the NFL in passing, eighth in rushing. If you combine his rushing and passing yards, I believe he has like more total yards than I think it's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. He has more total yards by himself than 18 teams in the NFL do right now. And you look historically at what Baltimore's been coming off a short week. Well, they're 16-1 straight up in games coming off short rests in the past 5 years. That 6 days or fewer rests. So they're really good in these games, and they're playing at home. But you look at and they stack up very well. At least their offensive philosophy against the Chargers defense, they really like to run the ball. They didn't run the ball much last week because they fell behind early, and you have to throw in those situations, and that's why Lamar Jackson did what he did. And that's why they weren't able to set the rushing record for most 100-yard rushing games consecutively. But they do stack up very well. It's a Chargers defense that ranks last against the run. The only team that's like in the vicinity is Seattle, which we'll talk about a little later. They haven't been very good against the run. It showed last week against the Browns. But I can't really say like that's everyone kind of struggles to stop the Browns rushing game because they have one of the best offensive lines and two really good running backs. So it's not really a good example, but nevertheless, the statistics say they're not very good at stopping the run, and Baltimore's really good at running the football. But I just go back to the eye test, and I just think based on what I've watched so far, and I still think Baltimore is a really good football team. I, at this point, I still think they're the favorite as of right now to win the division because I think Lamar Jackson is just that much more special than Baker Mayfield is. It's no shot at Baker Mayfield. But the eye test says I think the Chargers are a little bit better of a football team right now, despite their porous run defense. I've watched Baltimore be outplayed by Indianapolis for 3 quarters. I watched them struggle. They've been in close games with the Raiders, with all these teams. I think they've been in close games with Detroit. They struggled to play, against some of these mediocre teams, as you have said. And the Chargers, I think, just look better.
And I think Justin Herbert ultimately is the great equalizer. The way he's been playing, he's not turning the football over, and he's not afraid to throw into the teeth of a defense. I don't think Baltimore has been able to generate as much pressure with that front seven as they would have liked to. And if you don't generate pressure, well, Justin Herbert's going to pick you apart. And I think, as you said, the Chargers are a little bit more healthy of a football team. So I'm going to take the Chargers plus 3.5 to cover the spread and possibly win this game outright. But I can't say that definitively because Baltimore, as we've both mentioned and laid out the facts, they have a quarterback that's just playing out of his blankety blank mind right now. This is a must watch game, and it could swing either way. I could see it. Justin Tucker, we know how good he is. I could see it, coming down to a field goal. Who has the ball last? That sort of thing. So we'll see. But the winner of this game will, I think, get an advantage in terms of, and I know it's still early, but an advantage in terms of playoff positioning here going into this next portion of the NFL season. Well, I think a lot of this depends on the health of Daniel Jones, and we don't know. I guess I don't know the official status of Daniel Jones. And you just laid it out that he's not likely to be playing in this game, and he's been playing really good football, even though the Giants haven't necessarily been winning games and they're decimated with injuries. Daniel Jones has cut down on the turnovers, as we said, as we've been saying he needs to do. Um, he's thrown one interception so far this season, so he's not turning the football over, and he has all these weapons. And this defense and this coaching staff can keep them in games. Minus 10.5 on the road is a big number, especially with the Rams defense that at times hasn't looked as good as I think they could be here the past couple weeks. It's tough not knowing the status of Daniel Jones. If Daniel Jones was healthy and some of these other components were healthy for the Giants, I think I would take the Giants plus 10.5 at home. I think they're a good enough football team to hang around this game. I don't know if Mike Glennon can keep up with, and it's no offense to Mike Glennon, can keep up with Matthew Stafford. And I don't really know the status of any of the other key players on that Giants offense. I think they're too depleted right now to keep up with the Los Angeles Rams. It's tough, but I think right now, I think I would have to take. I'll come back to this one, but I think right now I'm going to take Rams minus 10.5. Right. Right. We shall see. Okay. I believe this is the last game of the early window. It is Minnesota at Carolina minus 1.5 for the Panthers. And I do not know the status of Dalvin Cook. Do you happen to know that? Because I do not. What do you? Okay, that's not very helpful. But go ahead and make your pick for this game. This is an interesting one. Okay. Right. I agree with you. I'm going to take the Panthers to win close. They don't need much to cover the spread. It's only -1.5. They're playing at home. They could have Christian McCaffrey back for this game, which will really help Sam Darnold. And look, the Vikings are coming on back on the road after a 3-game homestand. They barely beat Detroit last week, despite dominating in pretty much every statistical category, and that worries me just a little bit. I don't think we can trust them against a good defense, but I still think the Panthers are. Carolina, look, they've taken a step back. They took a step back last week offensively, but they still could have won that game if it weren't for a blocked punt. Right now, I think it's hard to argue that if you were to, rank these teams, the Panthers are at least on par with the Vikings in terms of how good each football team has been up until this point. We know that the Vikings have had some unfortunate, breaks go against them, and they could also be at 3-2 if one of those breaks goes for them here. But I just think I trust Carolina's coaching staff. I trust the home field advantage, and I trust the way this defense will be playing here in this game, and the sort of non-identity of this Vikings offense, as you said. So Carolina to win by like a field goal, maybe a touchdown. We'll see. This is another marquee matchup. You have Cleveland, who is coming off a loss in which they scored, over 40 points and no turnovers. They're actually the first team. They became the first team in NFL history to lose a football game in the NFL when they score over 40 points and do not turn the football over offensively. So say what you want about all that, but they're coming back home. They're actually favored in this game, which I think tells you what Vegas thinks about this Cleveland football team, despite losing grip of the Kansas City game early in the season, and then barely losing to the Chargers last week on the road. I still think Vegas thinks very highly of this team. Arizona, they struggled a little bit offensively against a talented San Francisco defense last week, and that was at home in the confines of Arizona. I don't know, forget what you call their stadium. But anyways, nonetheless, I do have confidence still in this Browns football team. I don't know what's going on in terms of Odell Beckham Jr. He just seems to sort of get in the way of things, and his receiving yards per game has gone down every single year of his career, and it's down to like 40 or 30 something along those lines receiving yards per game this season. I just think Baker Mayfield is better without him. This offense is better without him. They don't need him, but I like Cleveland to clean up some of the things that didn't go their way defensively last week, some of the miscommunication and all that stuff. I like this pass rush. that I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe has been playing without Jadeveon Clowney the past couple of weeks, or at least the past week or so. And I like Cleveland to rebound here and give Arizona its first loss of the season. But it's Kyler Murray. It's this offense. We saw an explosive offense last week exploit this Cleveland defense. They could definitely do it again. But I'm going to take Cleveland -2.5, given their running game and just this talented defense. But what do you think? All right. All right, moving on to your game, your Dallas Cowboys. How about them Cowboys? -4.5 at New England. You go first on this one since it's your team. That's fair. But and I'm going to go to a guy I mentioned a lot on this podcast because even though I don't necessarily agree with a lot of his takes, I still really respect what he does and what he stands for and what he does in this business of I guess sports talk, yeah, sports content, sports talk radio, and then obviously most recently podcasting. And that is one Colin Cowherd. And Colin Cowherd pointed out earlier this week, or I think it was yesterday or the day before, on his show when talking about the Cowboys, along with maybe one or two other NFL teams in this league, haven't really played a bad game yet. I mean, their loss was to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the opener, where you could say in that game that they outplayed the Buccaneers for a majority of that game. And the rest of the time, they've been just a machine offensively. And as he mentioned, they've been an opportunistic defense. They've done what they needed to do defensively. I think they're a much better football team than people are giving them credit for. I think in our preseason preview, I said that they would push. I think their over under win total was 9. I said they would push. I think they're going to blow past that. I think I see this team winning 11, maybe 12 games the way they're trending. I think Trayvon Diggs is just ready to pounce. He's a ball hawk. He's ready to pounce on any mistake that a rookie quarterback and Mac Jones might make. Dallas is the only team in the league to have 2 running backs with over 300 yards rushing. Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott are both playing exceptional football right now. They're not turning the ball over. Dak is the much better quarterback. And I think with some of the limitations that Mac Jones has in terms of pushing the football down the field and the lack of weaponry that he has been surrounded with and some of the injuries that they're dealing with in the running back room, I see Dallas continuing to roll here. And you look at their schedule. I'm sure you know their schedule, but I'm going to pull up their schedule real fast just to point out the fact that it could be a while longer before. I mean, obviously, it's the NFL, it's any given Sunday, but if this continues, if this level of play continues, it could be quite a while before Dallas loses another football game. And I'll look at their schedule here real fast. A lot of winnable games here coming up. Okay, so you have the Patriots, winnable game. You have your bye week next week. The Vikings, the Broncos, the Falcons, the Chiefs, the Raiders, the Saints. They can hang around with all of these teams. The way their defense is playing and the explosiveness of their offense. There is no game on this schedule that isn't winnable for the Dallas Cowboys. So I think, I just think they're playing too good of a brand of football right now. And I know it's Belichick, and I know it's the Patriots. I know it's New England. I know lots of things can go wrong when you play in Gillette Stadium. The weather can get, in the way. All this stuff can get in the way. But I just think Dallas is, I think they're a top. If we were to do, I definitely rank them in my top 5 NFL teams. Just the way I've watched them play and the eye test so far. So I'm going to pick Dallas minus 4.5. And when we come back to it, this might be my lock. I don't know yet, but it's one that I'm looking at for my lock. So. Right, -3.5 is a large number, especially when you look at the state of these two teams coming into this game. We know Denver is sound defensively. They have the edge there. Their pass rush is obviously lethal at times. And we know on the other side, Derek Carr is playing really good football. I think despite struggling the past couple weeks, um, this offense is due to get back on track. I think the key for this game is really just comes down to what is the Las Vegas Raiders mindset going into this game. What is the locker room like? What is the vibe around this organization like coming into this game? Because it's really, I think, sort of not a must win, but it's a critical game here already in week 6. You don't want to have that third straight loss. You don't want to fall back to 500 after building a 3-0 start. All these things come into play. But I think given Denver's inability to convert on third downs, as we've seen so far, and as I mentioned earlier, sort of their lack of identity offensively, some of the injuries that they do have on offense, and this improved Raiders pass rush, which I think can get to Teddy Bridgewater, will play a factor. And I think I'm relying on the fact that the Raiders will be able to run the football like maybe find something like Pittsburgh did last week, kind of take Von Miller out of the equation somehow, some way, and keep this game close. I think they have the better quarterback. I don't know about coach because we don't know what the interim head coach is going to do, but I like Las Vegas to cover. I can't say they win, and I don't know who's going to win this game, but I like Las Vegas to cover the spread, just like you do. Mm-hmm. Hmm. 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 Well, we talked about Seattle earlier. It's not disaster mode yet, but there is level of concern there, a large level of concern there. You have Geno Smith, who we saw play pretty well when he came into the game against the Rams last Thursday night. We have a Seattle football team that, despite its struggles, has had 3 extra days to prepare for this game. And that worries me a little bit as a Pittsburgh fan. Pittsburgh's coming off a big win against still what I think is a good Denver Broncos football team. But I'm going to have to take my Steelers -4.5 to beat Seattle on Sunday night. This game isn't what the NFL thought it was going to get at the beginning of the season, or I guess in the offseason when it scheduled this for prime time football. It's not Ben Roethlisberger and Russell Wilson. It's not 2 great offenses. It's not 2 teams with winning records. It's actually 2 teams with losing records who have had their fair share of struggles here at the start of the season, but they're not allowed to flex it. So, but they're still going to get. I mean, if you look at ratings, they just keep going up and up for the NFL. So I don't think that's a problem. But anyways, I think to get to the point, Pittsburgh's offensive line, especially that right side of the offensive line with Chuks Okorafor, who has been a weak point of the offensive line at right tackle. He was able to play really well last week, and I think that's so important to build confidence He was able to completely take Von Miller out of the football game, and Von Miller was playing really well coming into that game. I think despite losing Juju Smith-Schuster, some of the other weapons Pittsburgh has, they can create favorable matchups against a bad Seattle secondary that just cut Trey Flowers, who was one of their better coverage corners. I don't know how they plan to replace him. I don't know if they've made any moves to replace him. But I just think Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, who has seemed to completely fix in the offseason his case of the drops. He has 0 drops this season. And Ben Roethlisberger has his highest passer rating when targeting Deontay Johnson. I think the combination of route running, the physical mismatch that Chase Claypool creates, and the fact that I think the Steelers are going to get, now that Juju is hurt and out for the season, which sucks because I think his days in a Steelers uniform are now over. He's going to get a bigger contract than the Steelers, I think, want to pay for his level of production the past couple of years next offseason. I just think it's not that the Steelers don't want him back, but I just think he's going to get more money elsewhere. And the Steelers have more important players that they need to pay. And they, historically draft receivers really, really well. So I don't think replacing him will be that big of an issue. But despite that, I think getting the tight ends more involved in the passing game, the Pat Fryermuths of the world over the middle, the Eric Ebrons of the world, and even Zach Gentry, third-year tight end that we drafted out of Michigan a couple of years ago, a big body with good hands and good blocking ability. We have 3 capable tight ends now who I think can hurt you in a multitude of ways. As long as this offensive line builds on last week and Najee Harris can get going against a bad Seattle run defense and a bad Seattle defense in general, playing at home in front of the terrible towels, and a sort of a must-win, I would say, for both teams. Not as much Seattle because they have 2 winnable games after this, but definitely Pittsburgh going into their bye week. You'd much rather be 3-3 than 2-4, especially when you look at their schedule after the bye week. They have to play Cleveland right after the bye week. So I think it's desperation time for Pittsburgh. I could see Seattle if Geno Smith plays well and they can play good situational defense covering the spread, but I think Pittsburgh's going to win the game. My level of confidence in this Steelers team, just based on last week, and it's probably kind of disproportionate or shouldn't be this way, just based off the fact that they played well one game, has risen from a 3 to about a 6. From below average confidence, not really having any confidence at all, to having a decent amount of confidence that they're going to be in that conversation for the playoffs moving forward. Right. I will say one thing. Despite being this vaunted front seven that the Steelers have, the personnel, obviously, it looks great on paper. They have TJ Watt, who still is producing despite still not looking fully healthy. I still think he's somewhat compromised, given what we've watched the past couple of weeks. But given all this talent they have defensively, the Cam Haywards, the Alex Highsmiths, the Melvin Ingrams, the Devin Bush, all this talent, they've struggled in the past couple of weeks, even last week, generating the sort of pressure that we're used to a Pittsburgh team getting. And I think it's the fact that they've actually stopped blitzing for some weird reason. I think it's sort of an overcompensation for the fact that they're missing Cam Sutton, who's supposed to be their number 2 corner, and they're relying on a rookie, undrafted rookie, and James Pierre to play that second corner position. And they're going more to like dime and nickel packages and blitzing more 4-man front rather than, their traditional Blitzburg mentality. So I think that matchup between the Steelers front and the Seattle offensive line, if they can neutralize the Pittsburgh pass rush to the extent that it has been neutralized somewhat the past couple of weeks, they could definitely hang around this football game. But if they can't, then it's going to be really hard. But I just wanted to mention that. Huge test. Well, I think that Buffalo is the best team in the league. I know we said a couple weeks ago that it was the Rams, and then we said it was the Cardinals. Well, some said that. I don't think we said that, but some said that. And some think, it's, there's a couple other teams in the conversation here. But I think it's the Bills. You look at all the key indicators. Points per game, 34.4, first in the league. Points per game allowed. Their defense is suffocating now. 12.8. They've solved their main issue, and that's the pass rush component of this defense. They have depth on that defensive line. They're able to generate pressure without blitzing, and that showed in the Kansas City game. They only blitzed once in that entire game, and they were able to generate enough disruption to disrupt Patrick Mahomes. They're only allowing 12.8 points per game, first in the NFL. They lead the league in takeaways, 15, first in the NFL. And they also lead the league in average margin of victory, 21.6. Average margin of victory for the Buffalo Bills. Let's see, they have the better quarterback. They have the better defense. They have the only area I think Tennessee has an advantage is with Derrick Henry. And that's obviously goes for a lot of teams that Tennessee faces. And I think the Bills have the personnel to contain him. I think they're just Josh Allen is incredible. Dawson Knox has become sort of, I guess you could argue, like a top 5, top 6 tight end in the league in terms of production, at least. He's sneaky fast, and he seems to get open in those spaces, get behind defenses. And Stephon Diggs, as I've been saying, hasn't even really had that game where he just goes off yet. It's really been more Emmanuel Sanders and some of the supplemental parts of this Buffalo Bills offense. I just think they're too good right now. I think Tennessee is a good team, but I think the Bills are a special team. And you just look at what they've been doing ever since that week one, I think, slip up against Pittsburgh. I think they're just too good. I'm going to take Buffalo minus 5.5. Um, what do you think? Right. I haven't either. Yeah, they're firing on all cylinders. I think they just have they're going to be one of those teams. And now you look at it, I mean, they're going to be most likely, given their schedule, which really eases up here over the next couple weeks, um, given how good they're playing and their personnel and their roster and their quarterback, they're going to be, it's more likely than not that the AFC, the road to the Super Bowl is going through Buffalo when it comes January. That's just how it's looking right now. So they've put themselves in a really good position. And I mentioned the schedule. I just want to look at it real fast because I know that it really lightens up here the next couple weeks. So their schedule, they have this sort of tough game against the Titans, but then they have their bye week next week, and then they play the Dolphins, Jaguars, Jets, Colts. So that's four very winnable games and should win games for the Buffalo Bills. So if they win this game, they could be, I don't know, what is that, 9-1 going into week 12, late November, where their schedule kind of toughens back up again. So, yeah, everything is lining up right now for the Bills to be the number one seed in the AFC, but they do have some competitors. But in terms of wrapping this podcast up and picking a lock and changing any of our picks, if you do want to, in fact, change any of your picks, I think I'm going to go ahead and go with the Cowboys minus 4.5 against the Patriots. I just seem to have the most conviction with that game as my lock of the week. So, what is your lock of the week? It's another tough week in terms of lines for sure. Okay. Hey, look, betting on Tom Brady and that offense is never a bad idea. And you have an opportunity here now that you've picked Tampa Bay for your lock to pick up 2 wins right away. Maybe 3 games in total, just tomorrow night because I have picked the Eagles. And so if you get that and I get this wrong, that could be uh, big for you. So just pointing that out, it could be. Um, I in terms of me changing anything, the one I had my eye on was initially Cleveland -2.5, but I just feel really good about. And I know Arizona's a really good team, but I just feel really good about the fact that this Cleveland offense is going to be able to run the ball and maybe keep Kyler Murray off the field as much as possible. And they're going to be able to do enough to win. I don't know if I see any other games that I want to change. I mean, that Rams one is sort of one hanging on my mind. But I just can't go with the Giants based on the fact that they are missing so much right now on the offensive side of the ball. So I really don't see much at all that I want to change. But we both really need to rebound this week. And I think we will. I think we will. Peace.